that was being had at the previous broadcast, and that is the issue of voting. 60 years since Martin Luther King and a group of people from around the country agitated the American public to engage the United States Congress in a conversation and a vote to bring full voting rights to the people that had been disenfranchised after slavery and after Jim Crow. Some 60 years has passed, and every year, it seems like, the Voting Rights Act continues to be brought up in Congress, and every year, Congress passes a Voting Rights Act of sorts. Well, every 5 or 10 years. And here we are again today in 2022. Same conversation. But voting and the opportunity to vote has continually been stripped away. Now the question is, what will Congress do in the next number of days before the Martin Luther King birthday of 2022 celebration? And will the United States Senate actually support the Voting Rights Act? Hold on, wait a minute. There's more. There are 2 United States senators, Democrats, go figure, that say that they are in support of the Voting Rights Act, yet they don't want to vote to move it forward by changing the filibuster rules in the United States Senate, where a simple majority of 51 would move the voting rights bill forward. They say it's a nuclear annihilation of the policies and the procedures of the United States Senate. But what about the people? What about the folks, particularly in the southern states of Virginia, Arkansas, Alabama, yes, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, and so many other of the deep South states that are restricting their ability of Black folks to vote? What should be done? It's time. Well, there are some people that have chastised the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States for not taking this serious enough. As voting rights has been chipped away in almost every Republican state in which the Republican legislatures are controlling those state policy making bodies, there continues to be an effort to destroy the rights of Black folks and other people of color to vote. There has been conversations that the president and the vice president have done too little, too late. And this broadcaster agrees with that position. Too little, too late, Mr. President. Too little, too late, Madam Vice President. You should have been there from the beginning. And I understand that COVID-19 and other issues have impacted the way we live. But at the same time, the right, the human right, the civil right for people to vote is paramount in our democracy. We have seen how others will attempt to destroy this country. And it is us, Black folks, that have built it up. That's my opinion, and I could be wrong. 617-282-7794. Again, 617-282-7794. If you want to get in touch and have a conversation about voting rights, call that number. They will give you the link, to this broadcast, the Zoom link or the telephone number on Zoom to this broadcast, 617-282-7794 or 617-282-0685. This is Leon Rock, and this is All Things Black Politics here on Boston Black News. Yeah, there's more, my good friends. There is more. It's disgusting that we see the rights of Black folks being destroyed one state after another. It's disgusting that here in 2022, we find ourselves in this position. Well, the other day while I was preparing for the broadcast, I said, well, wait a minute, hold on. What's going on with this whole issue of voting rights? I'm reminded back in the day, and I'm old enough to remember this in many ways. I was born in the 50s. And in the 50s, I recollect as a young person that they had a situation actually in elementary school at, Dearborn School in Boston. My only Black teacher at the time, Mr. Brown, taught us one thing about civil rights during the time of upheaval. He said to us, do you know that Black people have to be tested in order to vote in the South? And we all looked at each other in amazement. Why? Because we didn't know. It was a civic lesson for us. Yeah, Black folks had to be tested in order to vote. Yeah, they would give you, a test. They would ask a question of you. Like a question about the Constitution, a question about the Bill of Rights. And if you didn't know the answer to the question, you didn't get the right to vote. That's a fact, my friends.
Recording in progress.
You didn't get the right to vote. Today, we find ourselves in this same position. Oh, by the way, back in the day, They would put a big jelly bean, yes, a jelly bean jar at the front entrance of the voting machines, at the voting booths. And they would ask Black folks, count the beans and tell us how many beans are in the jar. And if you couldn't decide how many beans were in the jar, you didn't get a right to vote. They would put every ridiculous barrier to you in order to be able to control if you voted or not. Well, today they do the same thing. In Georgia, they are telling Black folks and other folks that if you give a person that is in line a drink of water or food while they are in the line, well, guess what? You are violating state law, and you can and will be arrested. There's more. Two United States senators who call themselves Democrats are holding the bill up in the United States Senate. Yeah, a bill that will provide freedom and opportunity for people around the country to vote the same day without registering. Yes. And by the way, why shouldn't people get the right to vote? It's an opportunity that people around the country are asking for. And the Democrats, being as soft as they are, can't get their act together. Yeah, I called them soft or softies. That's what they are. Because guess what? Even let's look back just for a second. 1960s. John F. Kennedy had been shot. The person that took on the responsibility of being president after John F. Kennedy was LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Lyndon Baines Johnson a conservative Democrat from the great state of Texas, knew that the timing of a conversation about the rights of people of color, particularly African Americans, to vote was on the clock. Yes, Martin Luther King and others, the NAACP, Urban League, civil rights leaders of the time were urging the vote on civil rights. LBJ, as a conservative, extreme conservative at that, some even called him old school, yes, country boy bigot, but he knew how to move and shake. Yes, he knew how to move and shake, and he moved and shake the House of Representatives and the United States Senate and pushed to make sure that those good old boys in the South supported the legislation to move it forward, to get the bill passed. Well, Joe Biden says that he knows the United States Senate, and he knows and is a professional at moving legislation forward. That was his big deal. That's what he said. That's why he should be elected, because he knows how to get it done. Kamala Harris as well said she knows how to get it done. But the reality is that based on what has happened thus far, neither one has been able to get it done. They have been failures in that regard. Oh, by the way, this is the most important legislation of our time. And unlike LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, he has not been able to push the legislation forward. To get it done, my good friends, it's sickening. I'm wondering if it's as sickening to you as it is sickening to me. 617-282-7794 is the telephone number. Call in, call in, call in. 617-282-7794. Take that number down, by the way. You should have it readily available at all times, because guess what? Boston Black News, and by the way, Boston Praise Radio and TV are on 24 hours a day. And they have programming that is important for the African American community of Boston, actually the whole community of Boston, if not Massachusetts. So call in at 617-282-7794. Keep that number available, because you can always listen to the program at 617-282-7794 or 617-282-0685. This is Leon Rock, and this is Boston Black News on all things Black politics. And I'm talking about the whole issue. Yeah, and it gets under my skin. It really does. Yeah, the whole issue of voting rights, it gets under my skin. It really does. Yeah, gets as under my skin as the Boston, or what is it, New England Patriots. Yeah, let me wind down just a little bit, because I have to tell you, I'm just so disgusted with this particular issue of voting rights, and why Biden, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have not been able to engage the full Senate, both sides of the aisle, to get this done. They can't get one Republican senator. But why is it that they cannot get one Republican senator to move on the issue, and we get two Democratic senators that say no? Well, Richard Nixon, President or former President Richard Nixon knew how to get legislation passed. LBJ knew how to get legislation passed. Why, oh, why can't these two Democrat president and vice president get the legislation passed? That's my question. Why? 617-282-7794 is the telephone number. You can call in and we can have this conversation about this whole issue of voter rights. Voter rights, my good friends. Today on All Things Black Politics, and I'm your host, Leon Rock. Well, where do we stand on this issue? What is going to be done? And who is going to make the change? Joe Biden says that he wants to get this issue resolved in the next 2 or 3 days before the Martin Luther King holiday. That's Martin Luther King holiday, isn't it, on Monday? So guess what? You only got 2 or 3 days to get this resolved, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Actually, the president has admitted that voting rights legislation is not going to be able to be moved forward, and that's a disappointment, to say the least. It is an extreme disappointment. Oh, we should have done better. We can do better as a nation. We can do better as a nation. Well, I'm not going to have any guests today because I just wanted to have this conversation with you about voting rights, kind of educate those that don't know about what is going on here in Washington, D.C. and its impact on you, yes, in Boston, Massachusetts, and places in between. The Voting Rights Act, or the John Lewis Act. Yeah, the voting rights legislation is named after former Representative John Lewis, and it empowers a whole nation to be able to vote in the right way. Now, there's some people that say that this legislation, this federal legislation, should be limited. Yeah, they say it should be limited. Why? Why should the legislation be limited? There's some people are arguing that voting rights is a states' rights issue. Oh, we hear this again. Do you hear those words, states' rights? Yeah, that's, to me, one of those red words. Yeah, red words. Yeah, divisive words. They've used it since time immemorial. Oh, yeah, states' rights. The rights of states to decide how people vote. But shouldn't voting be a human right? Yeah, some people say that voting is a civil right. Well, in other parts of the world that look at the United States and its republic or democracy, whichever one you want to call it, they look at voting rights as the critical part of decision making in the United States, and they want to be the same way. Voting rights should be universal rights, the right to just go in the polls and vote. Yeah, now they're putting up all sorts of ID requirements and, limiting the number of, because Black folks started voting because of COVID. Black folks started voting by mail. Now they want to restrict who votes by mail and the requirements of voting by mail. And pretty much every state in the Deep South, they've changed the rules of engagement. They've changed the rules. And what are we going to do about that? Is there ever going to be a conversation in the United States Senate or the United States House of Representatives with regards to all these restrictions? And what are we going to do about it? Yeah, there has been limited conversation, in my humble opinion. What is up with the Congressional Black Caucus getting on the bully pulpit to have a conversation about voting rights? What about the NAACP getting on the bully pulpit to have a conversation about voting rights? What about the Urban League and all the Black churches and all the Black ministers coming together to have a conversation about voting rights? I know COVID-19 is impacting on our ability to get in the streets. There's no question about that. There's no question. I understand that. And maybe, just maybe, the politicians understand that too. But guess what? On January, I believe it was 6, when those folks wanted to take over this country and destroy this country, it was in the midst of COVID-19. And they got out and demonstrated. Why can't we? Oh, I still see demonstrations throughout Washington, D.C. Yeah, I see demonstrations throughout Washington, D.C. And the demonstrations continue to happen. But you know what? There's one thing that doesn't happen. Black folks aren't coming to Washington, D.C. to demonstrate. That's a fact. There's been few demonstrations. I know that there has been a demonstration around, criminal justice reform. I know that our representative, the U.S. representative, has been at the forefront of that and led the demonstration in many ways in Washington, D.C. just a number of months ago, in which, by the way, Boston Black News, all things Black politics, covered when Ayanna Pressley came to Washington, D.C. and demonstrated and said, hey, guess what? We demand that the President of the United States begin to release 100 women who are incarcerated in federal prisons during this COVID-19 challenge that we find ourselves in. But other than that, there has been, unfortunately, not enough being said or done by Black folks on the issue of voting rights. And I'm there's no question in my mind, not enough has been said or done about voting rights. And it's about time that the conversation begin and the action begin. We need to take action. We need to pull together political action committees. Oh, by the way, the Voting Rights Act, in my humble opinion, would have never got through with obviously the support of LBJ, the support of Black leadership, and most importantly, a groundswell of support in the African-American community, or what was called the Negro community at that time. There was action organizing at the grassroots level. That's what we need now. Grassroots organizing. Now, there may be some that debate that issue with me and say, not really, Rock. Not really. And I say, why not? 617-282-7794 is the call-in number. You can call in and join us live on Facebook. Yeah, they'll give you the Facebook link. Actually, you can call in on Facebook as well. Call in. They will give you the link to the broadcast. 617-282-0685 as well. This is All Things Black Politics. I'm Leon Rock. I'm here every Friday at 11 o'clock. Today, I decided not to have a guest. The guest is me, and we're just talking about politics in Washington, D.C. But let me bring the conversation just a little bit differently and talk about something that is getting under my skin as well. Lots of stuff get under my skin, clearly, right? Well, what gets under my skin right now is the whole issue of mass and caste. Yeah, mass and caste. I've been watching from the outside looking in. Yeah, from Washington, D.C., looking into Boston, my hometown. I grew up over near Mass and Cass, over there in Orchard Park. Yeah, you heard Orchard Park. Yeah, OP. And growing up in Orchard Park and then over with at my grandmother's house over there on Charlotte Avenue, my grandmother and grandfather's house on Charlotte Ave, there's one thing that I know. What has been experienced over in Mass and Cass is definitely wrong at every level. People on the streets of Mass and Cass have been moved from their tents and dispersed. The leadership of the city of Boston says that we've done our job and our job continues, but we have done our job by dispersing hundreds of people that, generally speaking, are in poverty, generally speaking, are homeless, generally speaking, have addictions, generally speaking, have other challenges regarding health and mental state. That's a fact. Now, the city of Boston has moved people off of the streets. And they allege that in moving folks off the street, they have, in many ways, solved the problem. Well, that has happened in Los Angeles. That has happened in Cincinnati. That has happened in a lot of major cities. They have moved them off the streets, but they have not solved the problem. They have dispersed them from one specific area and have moved them to other neighborhoods and communities in Boston. Yeah, when I was up in Boston just a few weeks ago, they were dispersing them even then. And all I saw was them being dispersed. When I say them, I don't mean negatively. When I saw the situation of people being moved from that Mass and Cass area, I seen them being dispersed all over Harrison Avenue and places in between. Yeah, that's a fact. Now the city says that we're solving this problem, and we've dispersed them. We have police officers in cars specifically at those locations, which they had when I was up there in Boston just a few weeks ago, and they're telling folks to move on, and they cannot camp out. Well, that might be a good thing for now, and I do think it is a good thing, relatively speaking. But at the same time, just dispersing them in itself doesn't solve the problem. There's a need for coordinated healthcare, coordinated, let us call it wraparound services for all of the citizens that find themselves in this position. There's a need for mental health services, housing services, re-entry services. By the way, many of these folks, when they acted out, were arrested. They're going to get out in 30 days. They're going to get out in a number of days. Where are they going to go? What type of re-entry services are they going to receive? Yeah. What type of re-entry services are they going to receive? 617-282-7794 is the telephone number. Again, 617-282-7794 or 617-282-0685. You can call in right now and have a conversation with me. I'd love to hear from you. This is All Things Black Politics, and this is Leon Rock. Well, I'll tell you, this has been a challenging conversation. A challenging conversation for all of us. Well, I'll tell you. And I'm hearing some feedback. If I guess someone wants to come in. Hello? Is someone coming in? If I guess someone wants to come in. Hello? This is Boston Black News, All Things Black Politics. This is Leon Rock, and I'm glad that you're in and having this conversation. Actually, wait a minute. I see on the line one of my favorite people, and actually really one of my favorite people. I did not know that, from time to time, Angela Rock comes in to have a conversation or listen in, and I'm glad that she's in, listening in. And if she has anything to say, she can pop in at any time to have that conversation. And Sharon Hinton,
hey now.
you're here as well. So Sharon Hinton, come on in. You have something to say.
Good morning. So I apologize. I haven't heard your whole show. I have the Mother's Prayer Garden at Jubilee. And so we had a great meeting this morning, the elders uplifting each other, the elder mothers in the community, because there's a lot to pray about. There's so much stuff going on, politics. I'm not sure if you saw the recent press conference that Mayor Wu had about Mass and Cass.
I did.
And Domingos was on the case again. Domingos brought to the attention of the mayor that there have been at least 5 people that have died. The day that there was a press conference, he brought up the fact that the day before they had found a dead body. And so I love it when people like yourself and Domingos and other people are keeping people on their toes, because there's a lot of stuff going on. There are a lot of people dying suddenly. And I think my theory, it's just a theory, is that after 2 years of people dealing with COVID and not having access to those services that they usually need to stay alive, whether it's high blood pressure or cancer treatment, dialysis, whatever it is, or gyms, or being able to go to the park to get healthier or to maintain whatever level of health they've had, that after 2 years of not having that, a lot of people are dying. More people in the Black community are dying. Less percentages of people are taking the measures for us as Black people. And I understand racism in the medical industry. I just recently got over a bout with COVID myself. There's a good friend of mine, Edith Bazell, who has been, who's in the middle of dealing with COVID, and she was diagnosed with COVID pneumonia. So there are people, and all of us were vaccinated, boosted, and got the flu shot. So I don't know what's going on, but for those people in our community who for whatever reason, haven't been vaccinated, don't want to be vaccinated,
Hmm.
then you need to figure out how you're going to keep people around you safe.
That's
Um,
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't see that happening, and
Yeah.
that's bothersome. I know who got me sick, and
Wow.
I'm very, very, very cautious. I'm masked up all the time, wash my hands, the whole
Mhm.
thing, and I still get sick. And so some people in our community are dying, and
Yeah.
who are choosing
Yeah.
not to be vaccinated. And then for those of us who have even, when we were sick, trying to get a hold of a test, whether it was a home test or going into a clinic, the lines were like 2.5, 3 hours long. I was already sick. I just
Mhm.
wanted to confirm it with the test, but to ask me to stand out in line in the night, in the dark, in the cold, um, that line, I was at Anna Cole Community Center. That
Mhm.
line was doubled up like a snake line from
Mm.
Bromley Heath all the way to Jackson
Right.
Square.
Right.
That was ridiculous. And I
Hmm.
don't know if it's like that now, but it stayed that way. So, I applaud Mayor Wu for actually getting on the case, man. She's really trying to fulfill her campaign promises, which is great. But I'm still looking for something specifically directed towards the Black community. I am. I mean, just call it me. I see stuff directed towards specific communities, and she really got
Hmm.
thrown into the fire. Like she didn't even
Yeah.
get the frying pan,
Right.
but
Yeah.
thrown right into the fire. And I see her tackling that. Um, and still, the church to me, the Black church I'm talking about, seems to be really quiet. More quiet. And then some of these other politicians, I saw a piece that you posted about Steve Tompkins being challenged by from by someone in his administration. Liz Miranda, I heard possibly Diane Wilkerson is going to run for the Senate seat. Possibly Minyard Culpepper, the
Wait
Senate
a
seat.
minute. Wait just a minute. Hot news. You're bringing hot news here. What?
I'm
You're
trying,
covering
bro. I'm
you're covering
trying.
everything but the kitchen sink in here. Let's go back on a couple of things that you mentioned. First, I'm so sorry that you had contracted COVID-19. I'm glad that you are have recovered or in recovery. God is good all the
All the
time.
time.
I'm so happy that that has occurred. So that's number one. Number two, I got to respond to a couple of things that you mentioned. COVID 19. COVID 19 is destroying the African American community of Boston and
Yes.
destroying the African American communities across the United States. There's no
In
question,
businesses.
no
In
doubt
in
about it.
businesses. That's
Yes,
right.
and businesses and administrations, Black folks as well, get to get away from all this noise, in my humble opinion. We have had a year or about a year of noise about the vaccine. The vaccine is good. The fact is, the vaccine is good. And we got to treat it like polio vaccine or chickenpox vaccine or the other vaccines that we are mandated to have when we go to school. As soon as we are born, we get vaccinated. And so this issue of conspiracy related to the vaccine is a no-go. Get over it, my good Black people. Stop the noise. Get vaccinated. It's very important for our lives. If you love
Yes.
your grandparents in particular, and if you love yourself, get vaccinated. That's my opinion, and I could be right. What do you think about that, Sharon Hinton?
Well, you need to get vaccinated, but you also need to be vigilant. It does not say like chickenpox and stuff like that is supposed to, and polio. Polio um, was pretty much wiped out for globally for a minute. And definitely in the United States, polio was wiped out, and then it started coming back, but nowhere near what was happening when people were being put in iron lungs and stuff like that. And even there was a president Roosevelt who was crippled by polio. So it's not at that level. So vaccines, when they work, they do work. This thing that we're dealing with now is a little bit. It's different because it doesn't keep you necessarily from getting sick. It keeps you, this is
From
the claim,
dying.
it keeps you from dying from it. And there are still people, let's be clear, who even though they've been vaccinated and have been boosted, still die, but not in the numbers and not passing it on in the numbers that it was before there was anything, before there was any vaccine, before there was any treatment, before there was anything. And so I get it, Black people. I've taught classes on racism in the medical industry and medical apartheid and all that other stuff. But and it may be something that was man-made, some biological warfare. I don't know, but to not take it because some orange-haired white fool, and I'll have to name him, who Hitlerian. He really is like a Hitler. When you study Hitler, and he studied Hitler, and you see what this man is doing, still doing it. He's still fundraising, and he's still planning on running in 2024, and still undercutting. And he and his 72 million sycophants, undercutting the democratic, the whole democratic institution that this country supposedly is built on. Why are we still talking about voting rights? That's crazy. I mean, that was done. It was done, and why is this still coming up? So when people have basically numbed themselves, or they're burnt out, or whatever it is, but they're not paying attention. The fact that the last election we had such low numbers coming out to vote for anything is crazy, and there's still stuff that's up for voting. I mean, the home rule petition in terms of elected versus appointed in the school committee, that's still in motion. John Lewis's Voting Rights Act, that's still in motion. The filibuster, that's still in motion. So when you vote these people into office, you have to hold them accountable. And if they don't do what they said they're going to do, and I give my hat goes off to Mayor Wu. She's attempting to do it. Instead of one line that was free and the bus line is 3. Now that may run out, who knows? But at least she's attempting to do it, and attempting. She's standing by the mandate in terms of because the deadline has come. That everybody in City Hall has to have this, and when you go and this overall masking mandate in terms of public places, she's trying to do that. And when she had the press conference, there were people yelling in the back room, "Shame on Wu," which that's there's a pithy little statement, that's catchy, but the reality is she's trying to keep the Massachusetts residents, the Boston residents, Bostonians alive. I mean, alive. That's really what it is. And so for her to have that courage to say, look. And then the other thing that she did, which was interesting, the state is saying, and I think the kids, I'm not sure because I haven't checked the news, I've been in meetings, the Boston Public School students were going to stage a walkout today. I don't know if that's still happening, if that's happened already. That's happening now. So if you're a parent and your kid is in school and decides to take that civic action because they're standing against the state mandate that says you got to go to school, school's got to be open, and whether or not your life is in jeopardy or the people that you're connected to in your family, if you bring the virus back to your family. So support your kids in terms of civic engagement and this civic action, despite the fact that civics is not being taught in schools right now. So there's a lot that's going on today.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I was in Boston, I'd be out there helping and supporting those students as they demonstrated. Have no question, no doubt about it. I would be double masked up, but I would be supporting those students as they show leadership like no other. Let me go back to this whole question of mass and caste, though. Now, you say that Michelle Wu is standing by her commitment to actually do the work, to actually get it done. Now, I question, and actually I was talking about this before you got on, about mass and caste, and my feeling from the outside looking in, that the solution is not necessarily just taking down the encampments. We've seen this actually here in Washington, D.C., they took down the encampments. In Los Angeles, they took down the encampments, and many other cities around, major cities across the United States, they've taken down the encampments, to learn later on that the encampments are spread out like Washington, D.C., instead of one specific location. Does that solve the problem of the addictions? Does that solve the problems of the health challenges and mental health challenges and re-entry problems of folks that come out of jail, find themselves underemployed, unemployed, and actually homeless because it takes about $2,700 a month to live in Boston? $2,700 a month for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Boston, which is absurd. So people coming out of prison, women and men coming out of prison, find themselves homeless, find themselves on the street because family members, they've been away for 5, 10, 15 years, or created problems inside the family. They can't come back to family. What do you call it? The homeless shelters are over capacity. What is the solution to this challenge? And is the mayor really doing a good deed over the past? I don't know. She hasn't been in 100 days, so I'm going to give her
No.
credit for that. But
Yeah.
is she really, or is this kind of like imagery?
So,
And by the way, that's one thing. And I got to kick all this stuff in. Dr. Sharon Hinton, I got to kick one more thing in, and that is, how about this guy that is Davis, former police commissioner Davis, that has been appointed by the mayor to be part of the selection committee for the new commissioner of the Boston Police Department. And by the way, I know I shouldn't be saying this, and Pastor, I know he's going to get upset if I say this, but I got to. And pray for me, Pastor. I'm sure you will. But Davis was and still is a bigot. He is. He's a bigot. Been a bigot. Been a bigot, and always will be a bigot. That's the reality. Oh,
I heard
that's
this.
the wall. Thank you
Boom.
very much.
And dropping a bomb. So real
Yes.
quick, because I know we're coming to the end of your show.
Uh-huh.
So here's the things that I liked and the things that bothered me in terms of the press conference. So the statements that were made by the mayor she recognized that this is just a piece of this, and she had a lot of different people from her cabinet administration, Boston Public Health Commission and housing, the chief of housing, and so in the police department, the people came in and said, and even Pine Street, the women's shelter Pine Street came in and said their statement. We know this is just the beginning. We're connecting people, wraparound services, but because of bitter cold, we want to get them off the street. And so they identified specific areas and numbers and where those numbers of people went, and recognized that there's been, a long-term impact on the businesses in Newmarket Square and the whole thing. Okay, that's cool. And then she made a trip a couple of weeks ago to go, take a ferry over to Long Island and talking about that. What I admire is the fact that she's not just saying this is it because you can't see them. The problem I had with that press conference is I know that on the ground, Domingos and Marla and Jahida, and there was a group of community folks that forced this past election and forced all these politicians who, frankly, as city councilors and at-large city councilors, weren't dealing with it, and they weren't acknowledged. Domingos at the end of the press conference in the Q&A, he brought up about the dead bodies that have been found there, and then you heard Mayor Wu say, "Oh, Domingos, how you doing?" And then you heard the police, outreach person, "Oh, thank you, Domingos." So they know who he is. And yet, when they were patting each other in the back and good job, look what we're doing, they did not. There's some people that need to be recognized by name because they've been in the ground. Domingos and Marlon, those guys have been there 5 to 6 years. And so they forced that conversation. So I have problems when you're not, and none of these people have done it for recognition, and they still don't do it for that, but they've been on the ground doing it. So acknowledge them at least, right?
Let me pose a question to you. Why would not because she wants to be a change agent, the mayor wants to be a change agent, why would Domingos not be part of the team that is making decisions moving forward as essentially a citizen review panel or whatever you would want to call it? But why wouldn't Domingos be part of that team? Why wouldn't she nominate him, select him, and other people in community to actually give her guidance moving forward? Particularly, as you said, Domingos, yourself, include yourself in there. You all been on the ground in the mix of things in relationship to mass and cash. You know this backwards and forwards, what the neighborhood and community needs. Why wouldn't the mayor select Domingos and yourself to be on a panel of sorts? And I know she probably has one, a community panel to guide her in this process. Just a question. Let me know what you think.
You would have to really have Domingos on to talk about the ins and outs. I know he's had conversations with her. Whether or
Mm.
not that's manifested itself into official capacity or position or whatever, I'm not sure. So I can't speak on that. I know that she, as well as Mayor Janey, as well as Marty Walsh, had an opportunity to put me on the school committee, and it didn't happen. And
Yeah.
I fault, and it's not like I can specifically just fault the nominating panel, because each one of those people know me. Mayor Wu knows me. Kim Janey knows me. Marty Walsh knows me. So that, that's another thing that structurally has to be addressed in terms of the nominating panel, which was the same throughout all of those administrations. And
Well, they know, they all know you. They all
yeah,
know you. Maybe they think that you're too radical, that you would shake it up. You would shake up the system, and they don't want the system to be shaken up. They
well,
want to stay the status quo. They
well,
know
it's
you.
already been shaken up because over 99,000 people, Boston residents, voted for the school committee to be elected, not
Good.
appointed.
Let's see
And
what
so,
happens with that. We only got
exactly.
2 minutes. We only got one more minute to go. So you got last words. Go right ahead.
So I'm asking, begging, pleading for people to do two things. One is get vaccinated, mask up, protect yourself and protect others. Two is get engaged, get registered to vote, and then vote. Find out about the candidates and vote and hold them accountable. And three is we're having a workshop with a series, Freedom Dreaming series. And I'll be sending out more information about that during Black History Month, Saturday, February 5th at 10 a.m. So stay tuned.
Thank you so very much. Dr. Sharon Hinton. Well, she's not a doctor right now, but she's going to be a doctor soon because she's over at Northeastern University, actually going for her doctorate degrees. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for coming in to the broadcast, Sharon Hinton. And
God bless you.
obviously, I always want to say thank you, Pastor Bruce Wall, for what you do on all things Black politics, Boston Black News, and yes, Boston Praise Radio and TV. Thank you all for joining in. Have a good evening, good afternoon, and good night. Thank you.
Recording stopped.